Greetings, comrades. As I am going through an especially rough time right now, I'm gonna put my usual donation rant at the beginning of the video instead of the end. As an independent content creator, my work on all channels and platforms is sustained through the generous donations of supporters and comrades, and allows me to focus as much time as possible on content creation. My PayPal is in the description of the video for anyone who is able and would like to contribute, which is especially appreciated in this rough time for me personally. Thank you, and red salute, comrades. I'm Comrade Shane, and welcome to Juche Lessons. The Juche idea clarifies the most correct way to keep the principle of independence in politics. Firstly, to set up people's power. Secondly, to build internal political forces. Thirdly, to map out policies independently according to one's decision with one's own guiding ideology, and exercise complete sovereignty and equality in external relations. The correct way to political independence is to establish people's power. General Secretary Kim Jong-il once said, quote, "In order to ensure political independence, it is imperative to set up a people's government," unquote. To set up people's power is the prerequisite for independence in politics. Because independent rights finds its concentric expression in state power, and the former is represented by the latter. This means the will and demand of the people are integrated by one's political organization and the state, and are reflected in its policy. This being the case, if the people are to realize their independence, they should have genuine people's power and become its masters. Only then can they realize political independence as masters and lead independent and creative life in all social fields. In the past, the Korean people were deprived of the country by Japanese imperialists, and without government, they had to lead a bitter life. But President Kim Il-sung restored the country and set up the people's government, and thus made them masters of the state and society, who shaped their destiny in an independent and creative way. Reality tells us that when the people have power and become genuine masters of the state and society, they can lead an independent and creative life. This is the reality that DPRK as a model, and as well as Cuba and Vietnam, this is the reality that they prove to us. And I would say this reality has been demonstrated all the more sharply with COVID. Comrade Kim Jong-il once said, quote, "In order to guarantee political independence, it is necessary to build internal political forces," unquote. To build internal political forces is one of the most important ways to ensure independence in politics. Because political forces are a decisive guarantee for independent politics. A country should have internal forces to conduct independent politics. Only then can the people map out their policy independently, according to their decision, and go their way without being influenced by the oppression and interference of others. Under the condition that the imperialists break wars overtly around the globe, violating sovereignty of the people, it is impossible to expect political independence without building its own internal revolutionary forces. The internal revolutionary forces that guarantee political independence and victory of the revolution consist of political forces, economic forces, and military forces. Political forces mean the united force of the people who are rallied ideologically around the party and its leader. The economic forces mean the material forces to provide material means necessary for the revolution and construction. And military forces, of course, mean the forces to defend and defeat armed invasion of the imperialists by oneself and carry out the revolution and construction by oneself. An important characteristic of a revolutionary army compared to a capitalist army is it is not just an armed wing of the bourgeois, but it is an armed wing and an organized wing of the proletariat, and therefore the army is not just concerned with defense of the country, but also with socialist construction itself. So the army in a socialist society fights on all these fronts: the political front, the economic front, and of course the military front. Now among these forces, the political forces are the main thing. That is because the political forces propel the revolution and decide economic and military force. Only by the political forces of the people, who are firmly rallied around their party, the working class party, and its leader, is it possible to build and use powerful economic and military forces. Of course, underscoring here the importance of unity, which the leader and the party is representative of. This does not detract, of course, from the collective laws and nature of the state and society. A lesson from the overthrow of socialism in Eastern Europe is that if the people are not prepared and united politically and ideologically, they cannot defeat counter-revolutionary offenses of the imperialists and reactionaries, however big military and economic forces they have. On the other hand, in the DPRK, the entire people are rallied around the party and the leader to form a political force in a single-hearted way, and therefore, even in the most difficult of circumstances, it has maintained political independence. The nature of socialist society means that the single-hearted unity of the leader, the party, and the people are the mainstay of the revolution, and the most powerful weapon that has no match. Because, of course, it's the most common saying, of course, that the power is in the people. The correct way to political independence is to decide and implement one's policy independently with one's own guiding ideology. Not to carbon copy Marxism-Leninism or copy previous examples of socialism such in USSR, but rather to grasp with the revolutionary essence of Marxism-Leninism and Juche and all these other examples that we have, and to synthesize them with our own tastes and with our own situation, to form our own revolutionary ideology that is in the revolutionary spirit of those who came before, of Marxism. What is important in politics is to define and implement policies. Without correct guiding ideology, it is impossible to map out policies in the interests of the people. If accepting pressure or interference by others, dancing to the tune of others in flunkyism, it is impossible to keep this principle. This was the case for many countries that became socialist countries after World War II. The parties in these countries followed flunkyism. They imitated others instead of following independence, absolutizing the policies of a big country that made the revolution first, and regarded it as the principle to accept its policies blindly. In these countries, they built up parties and states after the form of the big country, and if the big country held a party congress, they followed it, imitating it, whether it suited their situation or not. A common joke was that if it rained in Moscow, the people in Berlin and Budapest held up umbrellas. In the DPRK, on the other hand, they independently decided the policies of building party, state, and army, the policies of democratic reform, and the policy of intellectuals. They also defined in their taste the policy of socialist revolution to transform the forms of economy before the technical renovation. The main line of building socialist economy to develop light industry and agriculture simultaneously while giving priority to heavy industry. And the general line of building socialism through 3 revolutions: ideological, technical, and cultural. When the socialist countries that danced to the tune of the others collapsed with the fall of the big country, the DPRK carried forward its revolution without wavering, despite the big political upheavals that swept over the world and the enormous difficulties that it was then faced with. This historical fact tells us that it is possible to keep political independence of a country only when we have scientific guiding ideology that reflects the revolutionary demand of the masses, and on that basis sets up and implements correct policy independently. The other correct way to political independence, of course, is to exercise complete sovereignty and equality in external relations. This is the sacred rights of a country and nation. There can be big or small countries, but there should be no privileged and unprivileged countries. All countries are independent and should be equal. And thus no country should interfere in others' affairs, and no country should tolerate it upon others. Blind imitation and dependency in external relations lead to failure in solving all problems arising in the revolution and construction independently in the interests of the people. And this, of course, can lead to a disconnect between the party and the people. A most dangerous thing for a party that relies solely on the power of the people and the support of the people. Certain countries followed the Soviet Union blindly, so they failed to keep independence in external relations. As a result, they failed to build their own prosperous socialism, but followed the Soviet Union into revisionism and reform, eventually collapsing with the overthrow of the Soviet Union. All countries should remember these serious lessons and not only be intolerant of their own sovereignty being infringed upon, but also treat other countries equally and respect them. Only this way can each country substantially exercise its independent right in external relations and ensure political independence globally. It is necessary to know the relations between political sovereignty, independence in politics, and internationalism. Some countries slander other countries that maintain political independence in the world political arena, branding them incorrectly as isolationism. The Juche idea elucidates that political independence is not confronted with internationalism, but the former is the basis to strengthen the latter. Apart from political independence, there can be no genuine international unity and friendship. How is it possible to make friendly relations with the countries that interfere in others' affairs without respecting their sovereignty? As a matter of absolute fact, internationalist unity ought to be voluntary and equal. To this end, each country should keep its independence and to defend independence. This is the correct way in which revolutionary countries can contribute to the world revolution. That's all for this episode. Thanks for watching. If you liked what you saw, please remember to like, share, and subscribe. And if you have any ideas for future videos you'd like to see on the channel, please leave your suggestions in the comments. Be sure to check out our other social media on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And again, red salute, comrades.
조국은 총대라고 나의 심장에 새겨졌네. 조국